So you finished your felt flowers, now what? I've got 3 different ways on how you can finish your felt flowers stems to take them from boring to wow! Okay, so first of all, we've got 3 felt flowers here that are already made. This is the closed peony and the sweetheart rose. I've got videos that you can go ahead and find the patterns and the how-to make these ones, but today I'm just showing you how to finish them off because there's a few different ways, and every time I teach a flower, I feel like we're always leaving it kind of at this stem finish, which is fine, but I wanted to give you a few options on how to make it just feel a little bit more elegant, a little bit more complete, a little bit more than just kind of basic. Especially if you have a smaller bouquet, you kind of definitely notice that they're just all on thin wires if you're just throwing like a few flowers in a vase real quick. In this case, you can have more of the stem be a part and a complete look of your flower versus just a few flowers in a vase. The first version I want to show you is actually something I kind of teach in a lot of the different flower videos anyways, but I figured I'd go over it again because it's definitely one of the options of what you can do. So you've got your flower stem, and a really simple way to make your stem more complete is adding just basic leaves. It makes the flower feel a bit more fuller and it's just more dynamic and brings your eye up to the actual flower versus just like the stem. It's more of like an aesthetic eye draw up to the flower, which is the artwork, which is what you put your heart and soul into. Okay, so what I'm working with right now is just a 22 gauge wire that I've got 2 leaves pinch leaved on both sides. So this is pretty basic. I teach this in almost every single flower video. But the simplest way is you just hold it really tight and you're gonna twist tightly around. When I'm doing this, I really like to put a huge gap between my wires. That way, when you go to fluff them up, it feels more staggered versus parallel to each other, because usually when you're looking at a flower, none of your leaves are gonna be literally like coming out perfectly. It's nice when they're a little bit staggered. But just like that, we have a flower with leaves, and now as your eye's looking at it, it's drawing your eye up to the flower and making a much fuller stem. This also helps when you have your flowers in a vase and it's just kind of giving natural greenery. If you didn't make your own greenery stems, if each stem has its own greenery, then it kind of just helps break up the color and makes the flower really pop underneath that green too. Okay, so this was the easiest one to do, pretty darn basic, but I want to show you kind of the drawbacks of it is that you are seeing the curled wire underneath the flower stem. So that's the only drawback, is that it's not as realistic and not looking exactly like you would like per se, but it's totally acceptable. And I kind of think about it like too, is that when you go into someone's home and you're looking at their artwork or their decor, how often are you like, oh, okay. Like, just like when you go and clean your baseboards when people come and visit your home, nobody's looking at your baseboards. So it's more of a personal choice for you to have just what kind of completed project you want. Okay, so that is this option, which is still super beautiful and I love it. Okay, moving on. I'm gonna go ahead and grab another peony just so it matches a little bit with our leaves. And this time I have 1 leaf on 1 wire stem. Again, it's 22 gauge wire. This is a little bit longer. It doesn't need to be this long, but the longer it is, the more secure it'll be on your stem, because this version we are going to use floral tape. So the longer you have the floral tape holding it to like both wires together, the more secure and stronger it's gonna be without it kind of falling out. So you can do this one of 2 ways. It depends on where you want your leaf placement on this one. If you want your leaf placement more like this, where you've got the wire showing here, then you're gonna either want to wrap this first, so that way it's just uniform all the way down, or you can start the wrap from here all the way down, and then you're gonna see this wire. So that's kind of personal preference if you want it perfectly uniform all the way. I personally think you should have, if you're gonna wrap the whole thing in floral tape, the whole point is to make it look very uniform and complete. So I think you do need to wrap this one, but it's not the end of the world if you don't. So if you've ever worked with floral tape, it's like a crepe paper, that's kind of like bunched together, but it has wax all between those little crevices. So to activate the wax that essentially sticks to itself, you have to stretch it. And that opens up the wax to start sticking to itself. It does have like a sticky texture if you're using a lot of it. I found if you put lotion on your hands after you're done, it will take away that stickiness instead of washing with soap and water. Lotion works way better. When I've been doing floral tape over and over and over again and my hands just have that like wax coating on it, somehow that lotion just gets underneath the wax and lifts it off, where the soap just sits there and beads on top of the wax. So keep that in mind if you hate the feeling of floral tape, because that was a big contention with me for a long time. So when you're doing this, I already stretched that top, and it's always really, really hard to start it, especially on thinner wires. So you're gonna wanna be really, really patient with this process because it's very easy to get frustrated. So I like to really tightly roll it between my fingers and then slide it up and then really, really tightly pull it down. Now, as I'm rolling it down, I am stretching and pulling. Whoops. But you also don't want to pull that hard because you can tear it. But if you tear it, you just keep going and start right on top of your previous work and then keep going. So I am pulling, stretching, and rolling all the way around my wire. Because we are gonna put this wire on top of this wire, I do not have to go all the way to the bottom because this is gonna get covered up when we do this part. Now, the caveat to this, as we spoke earlier, the reason why I'm doing this is because we're gonna leave some of the wire hanging out. If you were to butt this up straight right here, there's no need to wrap this wire because you're not gonna see it at all. It's gonna come off right off that wire. But since we are using some wire to be flared out, you're gonna see that wire, so I want to wrap that with the floral tape. Another good tip before you start wrapping this flower is get an idea of where you want your leaf. So I want it about here-ish, and I want this much flare. I'm gonna bend my wire ahead of time exactly where I want it, because when you start wrapping it, it's very, very easy to get your hands full and forget where you have it, where you want it, how much wire, and it's easy to make that mistake. So I'm just visually clocking about 2 inches down-ish. And then that way, that'll trigger my brain to be like, okay, time to add the leaf, because that's where I like it. So doing this, it's the exact same thing. So it's really, really hard to start right at the top. So I start a little bit down, do that same thing, and then what I do is I just push it up. So I started it and then pushed it up. That way I can get my fingers in there tightly without having to be up against the actual flower. So now that it's there, we can start rolling it down. Oops, see it rolled down again, but that's okay because I'm gonna push it back up and keep rolling. Okay, so now we're about the spot I wanted it, and now you can see it. But if you notice, like, this hand can't really come off the flower, so that's why you kind of want to have an idea of what you're doing before you get to this point. So now we're going to add the wire and literally do the exact same thing and keep rolling it, and now they are connected right here. And then I'm covering that bottom of the wire too, where there was no floral tape, and going all the way down to the bottom a few times, and then pulling it, and then there's a little tail, and I just kind of pull that off, smush it back into itself to cover that bottom of the wire as well. And then there you go. So you would do this same process if you were adding multiple leaves. For instance, you would also do the same thing here, and then you would just be like, okay, now I'm gonna put a leaf right here, and a leaf here, and here, and here. As many leaves as you want, you're just gonna keep going down the same thing. And if you even wanted to do like a multi-staged leaf where you're putting a leaf on a leaf here, you would rework all of that at the beginning and then add your final leaf as you're building your flower. But the reason I really, really like this version is you don't see any of that crisscross wires, and that just makes it feel like this leaf stem is organically coming right out of your stem. And it gives your whole stem the same color floral tape, and it just looks really, really clean and finished. So the caveat to this method is that floral tape only comes in so many colors. They have a brown, there's like a lighter green, and I've seen a few different shades, but this is kind of your most generic standard color right here. So this floral tape matches this meadow shade of felt really, really well. But hypothetically, all of your leaves are this bright green color. This shade of floral tape is not going to match this so well. It's going to be obvious that you're using the floral tape with the actual stems, even though it's not going to match the leaf. I want to show you another version of how to wrap your stem and why I also like it possibly the best. Okay, so this is our last flower here. This is a sweetheart rose. And again, you can find out how to make this on the sweetheart rose tutorial. Another video for that. And what I've done here is I've cut strips of felt. The length wise doesn't quite matter because we're gonna trim any excess off or we're gonna add more as needed. What really matters is the width of the strip, and these are all 1/4 of an inch wide. So you could play with the width as well, but it's just gonna put a different look onto your flower stem, and that's totally up to you to like play with it, which could also be very fun if you're like, oh, what does it look like thinner? What does it look like thicker? The only caveat too is the thinner you go, the weaker the felt will get and it can tear. And I'm talking just in application processes. Once it's actually on the stem, I wouldn't worry about it. But as you're working with it and trying to loop it around your stem, it might rip and tear, and that could get really annoying. Then you got extra fibers you gotta deal with. So keep in mind not to go too thin with your strips. Okay, so again, we're gonna do the exact same thing where we're gonna kind of flare this leaf stem off, kind of like that. So you can get a full look, and I'm kind of gauging where I want it. Kind of like that. Looks very Beauty and the Beastie. I mean, it's Beastie. It's the wrong color rose, but it's very pretty. Like, just love how the leaf just totally shapes the flower. I mean, look at that from this to this. It's so amazing how much even just one leaf adds to the full aesthetic of a flower. So I am still working in the shade of Meadow just because that's kind of the way that these have all been started with their bases, and I wanted to make sure that we were matching that. So we're gonna start with our leaf again. Take our glue gun, a little bit of glue at the top, just a little bit. And I am working with my Surebonder glue gun, and it is by far my favorite. I am trying out the full-size detail tip. So far I'm really liking it, by the way. All right, so we've got a little bit of glue here. That's just to start it. We'll work a little bit faster once we get it going, but you don't want a messy top like that. I put way too much glue. I'm gonna wipe a little bit off. Don't do that at home unless you don't have any fingertips like me. So we're gonna twist it, and then now what we're gonna do is we're gonna add a little bit of glue going down right on our wire, and I'm trying to put as least amount as possible because you don't want to mess. And I'm going only down to that hump part that we talked about earlier because that's where it's going to go onto my other wire. And on the floral tape, the whole point was to just kind of keep going. But here, as to not make it so bulky for just this amount of length, which will be kind of weird on our stem, like why is there just a hump of extra felt? Why is it thicker right there and it's not even all the way down? I'm gonna stop here. Now, if this wire matched all the way down, lengthwise, you could totally wrap it all the way, that way it's even thicker. But because my wire only goes about halfway, I don't wanna do that. All right, so now we are going to trim this, like so. So now this wire is prepped and ready to go. Now we're gonna do the exact same thing on our flower. This we are gonna start at the very top because we can't, once we glue it, we can't just like push it up. All right, and I'm just gonna use that same piece right here, do one rotation, kind of hold it, let it set, and then roll it. So to finish this part, now what I do is I really like to put glue on my wire. So with this gun, just a caveat, is that it doesn't start pushing glue out until like 1/4 of an inch pull. And because I'm trying to put less, I'm going really slow, and I'm still obviously getting used to the pressure on this one. So it feels slow, but I'm still learning with this guy. Okay. I like putting it on the wire and then wrapping the felt around the wire, but you could put the glue on the felt as well, but this kind of helps me work in short spurts. And then we're just gonna go around, again, just like this. Then we're gonna go, let's see, where do we want this again? Hit that. Let's do 2 more loops, and then so I'm gonna go a really short distance here. And then this time I'm just rolling it because I have more room for my fingers this time. When I was starting at the beginning, I didn't have a place to like roll it nicely, but now I can roll it kind of with my fingers and it goes a lot smoother. So we're just going to pinch that about here-ish. And this is where it gets a little tricky because you're kind of having to like really hold it together, add glue, wrap at the same time, and it is a little hard with the dexterity, and it's just something you need to be patient with. Work in small batches and small sections if you're just getting used to it, so you're not having to add a ton of glue and then the glue setting before you're ready to actually twist the felt on. So I'm gonna go back to doing it this way because I'm attaching the two together. I don't want any mistakes. So now that I'm past that point, I can twist it. It's not twisting like I want it to, so we're just gonna gently kind of pull and twist around. Try to put as least amount of glue as possible here because you don't want glue kind of like splurging out the sides. You don't want any glue on your stem if you can help it. And again, be careful if you're touching hot glue. Just remember, it's hot. I'm ridiculous and silly, but don't touch glue if you can help it. They also make little silicone finger guards, which would be really helpful if you wanted to kind of like smush some glue away. And they're just literally like silicone fingertips and like you can't feel the glue underneath it. That was a 12-inch strip, and if you could see, I almost got all the way. But you just finish that strip and then literally go ahead and add another one here and just keep going. I'm again just putting just a little bit here to get it started, and then I'll go down and finish it. Okay, so now we're gonna trim it. And I'm gonna go through, and if there's any little glues that I need to get rid of, you can do that. Another good tip is, if this tip is nice and clean, you can go through here, find any spider webs or any little glue parts that kind of splurged out, flew out, whatever. And if it's like turned white because you touched it or it's just oxidized with the air, then you can put this hot tip over it, kind of remelt it, and it will take that whiteness away and just kind of clean up your flower. And it literally, it's kind of like magic. It kind of just erases your mistakes and it looks way better. And it's kind of like, oh, kind of handy. There you go. If you let your tips kind of get messy, it does get a little bit harder to do that trick. So turning your glue gun off every single time, keeping that tip nice and clean will help not make that messy, so you can do that. But if you look at, well, this tip's not even that bad, but this tip has a little bit of glue kind of around the edge, and it makes it a little bit harder to keep it clean when you're trying to do that trick. So now here is this version. So this one might be my favorite version, mostly because it matches the leaf and the base of your flower perfectly. Now it feels very, very cohesive and clean. It also makes your stem thicker and feel more substantial. So if you look at this version, you can see this like doubled in thickness, which I really, really like. And even with the floral tape, it's still thicker than that one, if I can hold them all at once. But it just makes it more substantial, easier to hold, easier to grab. And when you think about flower stems, they are significantly thicker than this 18 gauge wire. So it does help to have a little bit of thickness behind it. If you're doing like a wedding bouquet, I really like doing this with wedding bouquets because then it just feels like if you have stems coming out the bottom after you wrap it, it's nice and thick and something to grab and hold, and it just feels really, really complete and fools a lot of people too from first glance that like, is that real flowers or are those handmade? So anyways, this is just 3 versions of how to finish your felt flowers. To be honest, there are many other ways that you could keep going with this. You can make different versions and you can go thicker or thinner with this felt. The sky is the limit, and I want you guys just to kind of like get in that thought process of like opening the ideas of the possibilities. So Try these ways and then try and experiment with other different options. I do want to point out too that with this rolled version, you do have little ridges and bumps. So it's not like a perfect roll. You could take your time and try to get that as thin as possible, but I kind of like the texture on it too. So that's up to you as well. But I hope this helps. I hope this opens your minds, and I hope this helps elevate your flowers to the next level. If you found value in this, let me know in the comments. If you have other ways that you finish your flowers, let me know too. And be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you're not missing any future videos on how to make beautiful felt crafts with me. I loved having you here, guys. Thanks. I'll catch you next time.